This next chapter is pretty long. It's called Ghost Soldiers. And it talks a lot about what it's like to be injured and just what it's like psychologically to actually be a soldier. And so you might find that there are some good quotes here that could be used for a paper if that's something that you have to do in your class. So this first one, the first little page and a half, talks about the first time that Tim was shot. He talks about how that he had been hit along in the side, basically, and he ended up, thankfully, in the lap of the medic, Rat Kiley. And Rat Kiley ties on a compress, tells him to ease back. Then Rat Kiley runs off towards the fighting, I'm sure checking on other people. As he lays there alone, Tim O'Brien, just like in his head, is like, oh my God, I've been shot. You know, it's like, this is the real thing. Thank God for Rat Kiley. Every so often, maybe 4 times altogether, he trotted back to check me out, which took courage because there's a lot of fire going on. There's a lot of bombing. And he just keeps reassuring Tim, you know, it just easy does it. It's just a side wound. No problem unless you're pregnant. He makes a joke, you know, he rips off the compress, puts on another one, tells him to hold it in place, press hard, and then he jokes again. So he clearly knows how to treat somebody in the field. And then finally a chopper comes in and Tim is airlifted out along with 2 dead guys. So it's like, at least he's alive. And Rat Kiley waves him away and he's fine. You know, he goes and he is patched up. 26 days later, he returns and Rat Kiley is not there anymore. He has been wounded and shipped off to Japan. And there's a new medic, Bobby Jorgenson. And so this is a new name to add to the front of your book, just to keep all these people, you know, in mind. We're getting near the end of the story here. So this is the kind of character some people might forget. Jorgenson is not as good as Rat Kiley at being a medic. He is incompetent and scared. I mean, he just got there. So, you know, obviously people have medical training, but it's different to actually be in the war. So when I got shot the second time in the butt along the Song Trabong, a lot of bad things happened along the Song Trabong. It took the son of a bitch almost 10 minutes to work up the nerve to crawl over to me. By then, I was gone with pain and he had almost died of shock. So this is very critical. Like, you have to attend to people right away simply because of shock. And he bungled the patch job. And a couple weeks later, my ass started to rot away. You could actually peel off fillets of meat with your fingernail. That is so disgusting. But this is a serious injury. I mean, he's shot in the hip and in the butt, and then, you know, it's not cleaned properly. It's not, you know, disinfected properly, and he gets an infection. It almost becomes gangrene. I mean, this is like getting into your body. This is scary. I spent a month flat on my stomach. I couldn't walk or sit. I couldn't sleep. So this is upsetting to him. It's like this guy could have done a better job, obviously. After the rot cleared up, once I could think straight, I devoted a lot of time to figuring out how he would get back at Bobby Jorgenson. Getting shot should be an experience from which you can draw some small pride. But in his case, he's embarrassed because it's like, you know, it's embarrassing to say I got shot in the rear end and then like the medic didn't take care of it and it was disgustingly infected and all kinds of, it's just disgusting. And so he doesn't feel comfortable like bragging about, oh, I was injured and look at me now. The fact that it's even a humiliating injury makes him hate Bobby Jorgenson even more. The way some guys hated the Viet Cong, gut hate, the kind of hate that stays with you even in your dreams. I guess the higher-ups decided I'd been shot enough. At the end of December, when I was released from the 91st Evac Hospital, they transferred me over to Headquarters Company S4, the battalion supply section. So I put a smiley face here, like he is no longer at the front. He is in an area that's basically, you know, collecting arms and getting them sent out to the right places. Compared with the boonies, it was cushy duty. We had regular hours. There was a club with beer and movies. You know, he felt relatively safe. All of this seems to me, anyway, like a good thing. But, it's also not a good thing. And this is interesting. It says, I didn't complain, but in an odd way, there were times when I missed the adventure. It's a hard thing to explain to somebody who hasn't felt it, but the presence of death and danger has a way of bringing you fully awake. It makes things vivid. When you're afraid, you see things you never saw before. You pay attention to the world. You make close friends. Like, he misses the camaraderie of his alpha company, for sure. I figured my war was over. If it hadn't been for the constant ache in my butt, I'm sure things would have worked out fine, but it hurt. I had to sleep on my belly. He'd be squirming around in the middle of the night, and then he'd start remembering how Bobby Jorgenson had almost killed him. Shock, I think. How could he forget to treat for shock? That's the first thing you do on a battlefield, or on any injury. It's the first thing you do. In March, the Alpha Company came in for a stand down. Now, I had to look this up. I didn't know what a stand down was. A stand down is when a group comes in from the battlefield to a place that is more secure, where they can rest and recuperate and, maybe get some extra nourishment, get some extra sleep. So they're still like somewhat serving. It's not like they're not totally off duty. We'll see that wherever they're staying is still a place that needs to be protected, but they are no longer on the front lines. So, he says, I was there at the helipad to meet the choppers. Mitchell Sanders and Azar and Henry Dobbins and Dave Jensen and Norman Boker slapped hands with me, and we piled their gear in my Jeep and drove down to the Alpha Hooches. So this is like where they're going to be relaxing. So he's released from the hospital and is allowed to join his group in this sort of rest and recuperation area. We partied until chow time. We kept on partying. It was one of the rituals. Even if you weren't in the mood, you did it on principle. By midnight, it was story time. Morty Phillips used up his luck, Boker said. I smiled and waited. Okay, who's this? This is a new name we have not heard. This is just to remind you that there are 18 guys in this group, in the Alpha Company, and Morty Phillips is one of them, but we haven't really been following him. So this is just a story. Remember, they love to tell stories. Go on, says Azar, tell him everything. Well, that's about it. Poor Marty wasted his luck. He pissed it away. Azar, the dummy, pisses it away on nothing. Norman Boker nodded, started to speak, but then stopped and got up and moved to the cooler and shoved his hands in, gets another beer. Their deep bush tans, the sores and blisters, the stories, the in-it togetherness. I felt close to them, but I also felt a new sense of separation. My fatigues were starched. I had a neat haircut and the clean, sterile smell of the rear. They were still my buddies, at least on one level, but once you leave the boonies, the whole comrade business gets turned around. You become like a civilian. He felt like a civilian, and it made him sad. These guys have been my brothers. We loved one another, and he doesn't feel that same connection anymore. So Boker gets the beer, and then he returns to his story. He says it was out at my K, one of those killer hot days. Everyone's lying around, and they realize Morty is missing. Like, where is he? No one knows. Anyhow, we sent out 2 search patrols, he says. No trace of him. It was almost dark. Lieutenant Cross, he's ready to have a fit. You know how he gets. And then guess what? Morty shows, I said. That's right, Morty shows. We almost chalk him up to MIA, and then bingo, he shows. Soaking wet, said Azar. Okay, tell it. So now they start to argue about how to tell the story. Soaking wet, he confirms. He says that the moron went for a swim. I could see this being a quiz question, like, who's Morty? Who's Morty? He's the guy who went for a swim, just disappeared from the group and didn't tell anybody. Do you believe that? All alone, he just takes off, hikes a couple clicks, finds himself a river, strips down and hops in and starts doing the goddamn breaststroke. No security, no nothing. This is dangerous. He says, this is my K. We're talking about dinks everywhere. The guy goes for a swim. Tim O'Brien's like, yeah, that was crazy. He looks across the hooch. 20 or 30 guys were there, some drinking, some passed out, but I couldn't find Morty Phillips among them. So I'm wondering, okay, what happened to him? How did his luck run out? Here's the kicker, man. No more Morty. No? Morty's luck gets y'all used up. I'm thinking, did he die? A few days later, maybe a week, he feels real dizzy. He pukes a lot. Temperature zooms way up. He's really sick. He swallowed a VC virus or something. So he got some sort of, parasite or something from that water. Bobby Jorgenson, I said, where is he? Okay, so remember, Tim O'Brien he's been thinking about revenge. Be cool. Where's my good buddy, Bobby? Norman Boker made a short clicking sound. Do you want to hear this? Yes or no? Yes, I do. Okay, listen up. Morty gets sick. Like you never seen anybody so sick. He's like paralyzed. Polio, maybe. Dobbins says, no, it's not polio. You got it wrong. Well, maybe polio. No, not polio. I'm just saying that Jorgenson is, really, really sick. Or that maybe he has like that weird elephant disease or something. Like whatever it is, it has affected him. Not only is he throwing up and everything else, but he can't move. Across the hooch, sitting by himself, Azar grinned and snapped his fingers. Either way, he said, it goes to show you, don't throw away luck on little stuff. You got to save it up. Morty was due. You don't mess around like that. You don't just fritter away all your luck. So they sort of talk about, what a dumb thing it was for him to go swimming. So we don't really find out like what happened to him exactly, besides he got sick. We sat quietly for a long time. Finally, he says again, Tim O'Brien says again, where's Jorgenson? Another thing, 3 times a day, no matter what, I had to stop what I was doing, find a private place, and put all this antibacterial ointment on his wound. The stuff left stains on the seat of my trousers, big yellow splotches, so there were jokes, obviously. During the first full day of the Alpha stand down, I didn't run into Bobby Jorgenson once. Not at Chow, not at the EM Club, not even during our long booze sessions in the Alpha Company hooch. At one point, I almost went looking for him, but my friend Mitchell Sanders told me to forget it. Let it ride, he said. The kid messed up bad, but the thing is, he was brand new, and he's doing better now. I mean, listen, the guy knows his shit. Say what you want, but he kept Morty alive. Okay, so Morty Phillips did not die. Bobby Jorgenson was able to keep him stable, at least. People change. Situations change. I hate to say this, man, but you're out of touch. Jorgenson, he's with us now. And then Tim is like, and I'm not? And Mitchell Sanders says, I guess you're not. So he literally says to Tim O'Brien, like, you're not part of us anymore. You're a civilian now, and Jorgenson is with us, and he's a good guy. So I think it's important to make a note here. Anytime there's a shift in a character's feelings or psychological state or attitude, there's change going on. It was anger. He feels something shift. Anger, but it's also loss. I didn't fit anymore. They were soldiers and I wasn't. And he also felt betrayed, like he wanted them to stand by him, in his desire for revenge. I mean, remember, this is kind of a theme. They definitely take revenge out on each other when someone does something that's hurtful. For a long while, I just stared at Mitchell Sanders. Loyalty, I said, such a pal. In the morning, I ran into Bobby Jorgenson. We get a description of him. He seems smaller than Tim remembered, a little squirrel of a guy, short and stumpy looking. He's nervous, Bobby Jorgenson is, to see Tim. Well, he said, I just looked down at his boots. Those boots, I remembered them from when I got shot out along the Song Trebong, the bullet inside me, all that pain. Jorgenson finally says, look, can we talk? I didn't move. I didn't say a word. Jorgenson's tongue flicked out. Listen, man, I fucked up. What else can I say? I'm sorry. When you got hit, I kept telling myself to move, but I couldn't do it like I was full of drugs or something. You ever feel like that, like you can't even move? Nope, I said. I never did. So, this is like, I'm a man and you're not. I'm a soldier and you're not. I'm brave and you're not. But can't you at least? No. Tim has no empathy for this situation at all. Even though he was scared and Jorgenson was brand new, Tim has no empathy. Excuses? Jorgenson's lip twitched. No, I botched it, period. Got all frozen up, I guess. The noise and shooting and everything. My first firefight, I couldn't handle it. When I heard about the shock and gangrene, I felt miserable. Nightmares, he dreams of Tim, like, just getting so sick. And he remembers like just how he heard Tim screaming, but his legs wouldn't move. He made a small sound in his throat, low and feathery, and I thought he might cry. That would have ended it. I would have patted his shoulder and told him to forget it, but he kept his control. He swallowed whatever that sound was and forced a smile and tried to shake my hand. It gave me an excuse to glare at him. It's not that easy. Tim, I can't go back and do things over. My ass. Jorgenson kept pushing his hand out at me. He looked so earnest, sad, and hurt. It almost made me feel guilty, but not quite. Eventually, Tim mutters something and gets in his Jeep and leaves him standing there so he doesn't shake his hand. I hated him for making me stop hating him. So he doesn't shake his hand because he can't wrap his head around the idea that he actually has forgiven him to some degree, that he does understand, even though he says he doesn't. Something had gone wrong. I'd come to this war a quiet, thoughtful sort of person, a college grad, and I had turned mean inside. So here's another example of how war changes a person, even a little cruel. For all my education, all my fine liberal arts values, I now felt a deep coldness inside me, something dark and beyond reason. It was down inside like a rock. So he is so full of revenge. He's like, I'll get him. I'm going to get him. The need for revenge kept eating at me. Sometimes he drank too much. And so like this is like a demon inside of him. Finally, he asked Mitchell Sanders to give him a hand, which I think this was a foolish mistake because obviously Mitchell Sanders is on Bobby Jorgenson's side. No pain, I said, just basic psychology, mess with his head a little. Nope, negative, Sanders says. Spook the fucker. Man, you're sick. So there's no way that Mitchell Sanders is going to be involved in any kind of revenge to scare Jorgenson. So he has to turn to Azar. So I think Azar, I've had a sense all along that he's a little bit more evil than the others. He has a pretty crass attitude. We're definitely going to see the real side of Azar coming up here. So Tim explains what his plan is, and Azar smiles. He says, tonight, and Tim says, just don't get carried away. He's got a plan, but he wants it to only go so far. Azar flicked an eyebrow and started snapping his fingers. Understand, I said? Roger Dodger, only a game, right? So I put a squiggly line here. This is a long chapter. Teachers, you could actually assign this in 2 parts. Certainly if you're a student and you're reading this, you could take a break here. We're going to have a little shift. This is about just like what the soldiers refer to the enemy as. We call the enemy ghosts. Bad night, we'd say the ghosts are out, talking about the enemy. To get spooked meant like to get killed. Like, don't get spooked. It's not only don't get scared, but also don't get killed. Or we say, careful, man, don't give up the ghost. Like, don't let those ghosts get you. We were fighting forces that did not obey the laws of 20th century science. So this is historically true. This was very unconventional. This is not anything that American soldiers were used to, because a lot of people in South Vietnam were fighting with the communists and were the enemy at night, but they seemed to be, with the Americans and independence during the day. Late at night on guard, it seemed that all Vietnam was alive and shimmering, odd shapes in the paddies, boogeymen in sandals, spirits dancing in the pagodas. Now remember, too, that the Vietnamese are used to living in this wild jungle-like environment. And so to them, they know their way around. They know how to walk quietly through the grasses and all those trees and everything. And of course, American soldiers don't know that. The way he came out at night, the ghost, how you never really saw him, just thought that you did. So there's like this analogy. It's like a metaphor, saying that the enemy is a ghost is just showing how elusive they are and how unpredictable and how hard it is to identify them. Then we get another description of Azar. He's wound up tight. He's calling the night Halloween because they're going to scare Bobby Jorgenson. Because he's so jacked up, Tim almost canceled the whole operation. He's back and forth. He's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do it. Mitchell Sanders won't even speak to him because he's angry that he's like holding a grudge. Finally, he decides, no, I'm going to do it. He goes through the motions, but he doesn't have the heart or the emotion in it. So he's very conflicted here. I think this is also an example of just inner conflict. I rigged up my special effects, checked out the terrain, measured the distance. I didn't make mistakes, but somehow it felt as if I were gearing up to fight somebody else's war. I didn't have the patriotic zeal. So it's like, it doesn't feel the same as a real war because he's conflicted internally about whether he should be doing this because Azar is too excited and Sanders has already judged him as, crossing the line and that Jorgenson doesn't deserve this. If there had been a dignified way out, I might have taken it. So at this point, he's like, gosh, I wish I don't have to do this. But like, he does feel like a duty to revenge, to sort of honor his revenge. He came close to calling it quits. Maybe I was fishing for something, one last apology, something public. But when he sees Jorgenson in the cafeteria, Jorgenson only gazes back at him. It was a strange gaze, straight on and unafraid, as if apologies were no longer required. He was sitting there with Dave Jensen and Mitchell Sanders and a few others, and he seemed to fit very just right in, all chummy with all of Tim O'Brien's friends. That's what cinched it. Jealousy. He's jealous that Jorgenson is included and he is not. So he has a renewed interest in this revenge. He goes back to his hooch. He showers and shaves, throws his helmet against the wall because he's pissed, lays down, gets up, prowled around just before dusk when they all stand for roll call. Then they go off into groups. Some went to write letters or to party or to sleep. Others trooped down to the base perimeter, where for the next 11 hours they would pull night guard duty. It was standard operating procedure, one night on and one night off. This was Jorgenson's night on. So he's going to be on all-night duty, guarding their base. I knew that in advance, of course. And he also knows where he's assigned, what bunker he'll be at. He'll be at Bunker 6, a pile of sandbags at the southwest corner of the perimeter. So that morning, Tim has counted out every inch of his position. Like, he's got everything set up. He and Azar even followed him and saw how he was going to lay out his poncho and his little claymores with their firing devices, his radio, and he has his rifle. Roast pigeon on a spit. I smell it sizzling, except this isn't for real. So remember, Tim is like, remember, we have to keep this somewhat, under control. Azar shrugged. So Azar, we already know, this is foreshadowing. Azar is going to go beyond what needs to be done here to scare him. And he's like, I don't know what's real anymore, being in the war. Who's to say what's real? Psychology, that was one thing I knew. So remember, Tim O'Brien, he went to university. He was a social science major. He definitely understands psychology. You don't try to scare people in broad daylight. You wait, because in the darkness, people get more afraid. He talks about knowing what it was like when he was on night duty and how the fear would multiply hour after hour and after hour, and how suddenly you would start to hallucinate and think that you were seeing things and hearing things. You would start thinking about all the people who died, Kurt Lemon, Kiowa, Ted Lavender, and others. And then pretty soon you start to ponder the stories you've heard about Charlie's Magic, the time some guys cornered 2 VC in a dead-end tunnel, no way out, but how when the tunnel was fragged and searched, nothing was found except for rats. So it's there are stories that they tell and pass down of times when the enemy was out there, but then they couldn't find them. And so you just, it just again reinforces how elusive this enemy is. So this whole page is really just what goes on psychologically when you're sitting out in the dark on night patrol. Come on, Azar said, let's do it. He's getting super excited. But Tim's like, no, we have to wait. Waiting was the trick. So they go out to the movies and they watch Barbarella again for the 8th straight night. It's a bad movie, but it keeps Azar occupied. He's crazy about Jane Fonda. So they watch this movie. Then they go to the club and they share a six-pack. Mitchell Sanders was there, but he won't even look at Tim. Around closing time, I nodded to Azar, and then Azar's excited. Well, goody gumdrop. They go to his hooch, they get their gear, and then they head out, and he imagines it's like they're back in the bush. They sort of observe good field discipline. They don't talk, like they do all the things you do if you're actually trying to capture an enemy or, frighten an enemy and actually get, kill them. I shouldered my gear and crossed over to a heap of boulders that overlooked Jorgenson's position. I was directly behind him, 32 meters away. Even in the heavy darkness, no moon yet, I could make out the kid's silhouette, a helmet, a pair of shoulders, or his rifle. He has 10 flares that he unscrews and lines them up in front of him. They're sort of counting down. Azar's on the other side. Edging over to my left, I groped for the ropes I set up that afternoon and found them. Then he has like these physical sensations. His head starts to feel light and fluttery. He remembers it like when he used to actually be out in the boonies, the giddiness and the doubt and the awe. And he'd remember how it would be like you're in a movie and that there's a camera on you, so you begin acting like you're somebody else. You go through these motions as a soldier, not as Tim. There was coldness inside me. I wasn't myself. I felt hollow and dangerous. So this is what it feels like to be on attack, like to be ready to ambush, to be ready to literally engage in a fight. And this is interesting, really relevant description. I took a breath, fingered the first rope, and gave it a sharp little jerk. There's a little clatter outside the wire. So he just makes like tiny little noises. Now it starts. 8 ropes altogether. I had 4, Azar had 4. Each rope was hooked to a homemade noisemaker in front of Jorgenson's bunker. 8 ammo cans filled with rifle cartridges. Simple devices. So it's almost like they make like a little tiny shaker that they can manipulate with these ropes. I waited a moment and then gave all 4 of my ropes a little tug. Very delicate, just very tiny sound. If you weren't listening, you would miss it. But Jorgenson was listening, and he freezes. He's like, uh-oh, what's that? Then Azar does it. They do this for 10 minutes, staggering the rhythm, noise, silence, noise, building the tension. Squinting down at Jorgenson's position, I felt a swell of immense power. It was a feeling the VC must have, like a puppeteer, yank on the ropes, watch the silly wooden soldier jump and twitch. This is like an interesting simile. One by one in sequence, I tugged on each of the ropes, and the sounds came flowing back at me with a soft, indefinite formlessness. I heard myself chuckle. I mean, I wrote oops because I'm like, uh-oh, was he going to get caught? Then presently I came unattached from the natural world. I felt the hinges go, eyes closed. I seemed to rise up out of my own body and float through the dark down to Jorgenson's position. I was invisible. I had no shape. So he becomes like a ghost because he's the enemy to Jorgenson's sort of, psychiatric state at this point. He imagines what it's like to be down there with him. I was part of the night. I was the land itself, everything. The fireflies and patties. I was atrocity. I was numb. So creepy, Azar said. Wet pants and goosebumps. He held a beer out to me, but I shook my head. So now this is not clear right away when you read this. They're not having a beer out there while they're tormenting Jorgenson. They've taken a break from this torment and gone back to their hooch, and they're just like chilling. We sat in the dim light of my hooch, boots off, listening to Mary Hopkin on my tape deck. What's next? Wait, I said. Yeah, but I mean, just listen. So he loves Mary Hopkins. So Mary Hopkins sang Those Were the Days. It was a UK #1 hit in 1968. I think Paul McCartney wrote it. So this is like just a reference, very cultural reference to music of the time. And he loves this song. And then after a while, they go back. We slipped back to our positions and went to work again with the ropes, louder this time. At 3 a.m, Azar set off the first trip flare. So there's like a little explosion or little looks like not just a sound, but you can see something. Jorgenson moved. He made a short, low cry, not even a cry, like he's afraid. He lunges sideways and rolls towards a heap of sandbags and crouches there, hugging his rifle. There, I whispered, now you know. I could read his mind. I was there with him. Together we understood what terror was. You're not human anymore. Again, not like a ghost. You're a shadow. You slip out of your own skin, like molting, shedding your own history and your own future, leaving behind everything you ever were or wanted to believe in. So these are all great passages for a close read. Like, how does this motif of a ghost help us understand what it's like to be a victim, what it's like to be the enemy? It's really describing like what happens to a soldier psychologically, regardless of what side they're on, when they're fighting in a battle. This now was something we shared. I felt close to him, not compassion, but you have felt now what I feel. Tim says, okay, that's enough. We're done. And Azar's like, oh, sure. He's like, no, we're not. And he's like, yeah, no, we are. Azar gives a small, thin smile. So this is an indication of an evil smile. Serious, he said? That's way too serious for me. I'm your basic fun lover. When he smiled again, I knew it was hopeless, but I tried. I told him the score was even. We'd made our point, I said. No need to rub it in. Azar stared at me. Poor, poor boy, he said. The rest was inflection and white eyes. So Tim doesn't stop him. I mean, think about this. If Tim wants this whole spooking to be over, he could just walk out there and tell Jorgenson, okay, that was me. Just, we're even. But no, he lets Azar lead into this next level of torment. We moved in for the last phase. Azar was in command now. I tagged after him thinking maybe I could keep a lid on. Don't take this personal, Azar says. I just like to finish things. So they had a plan. I mean, Tim had this plan. This is Tim's plan. I didn't look at him. As we approached the wire, Azar put his hand on my shoulder, guiding me toward the boulder pile. He knelt down and inspected the ropes and flares, nodded to himself, and peered out at Jorgenson's bunker. You know something, he said, out here at night I almost feel like a kid again. The Vietnam experience, I love this shit. So he likes all this battle. Let's just, shh. This is what you wanted, he said. You dig playing war. That's all this is. A cute little backyard war game. Bring back the memories. So this was what Tim planned. Whatever they're going to do here was part of Tim's plan. Come on, Tim says. Let's just quit. And he says he's pitiful. Now there's another shift. I felt a brittleness come over me, a hollow sensation as if someone could reach out and crush me like a Christmas tree ornament. There's a great simile. It was the same feeling I'd had out along the Song Trebong, like I was losing myself, everything spilling out. And so this is bringing back a trauma response. The fact that they're about to, increase the torment and scare Jorgenson even more reminds Tim of how helpless he felt when he got injured. He remembers everything about, so all of this page is how he, what his mind goes through when he's injured that time that Jorgenson doesn't attend to him. He remembers how, Jorgenson was obviously paralyzed physically by fear. Well, Tim was paralyzed psychologically and vocally by fear. He wanted to say treat for shock, but his tongue wouldn't fit around the words. So they each experienced paralysis out there. Then I slipped under for a while, and when I came back, Jorgenson was using a knife to cut off my pants. He shot in the morphine, which scared me. He remembers sort of getting dizzy. And so because he's thinking about all of this, Azar is like, dude, are you even awake? He's not engaged in what's going on here at this moment. Down at Bunker 6, things were silent. It looks abandoned. Please, he says to Azar. But Azar sends up a flare over Jorgenson's bunker. It explodes almost without noise, a red flash. There was a whimper. Please, I said. Twice more, Azar fired up red flares. At one point, he turned toward me and lifted his eyebrows. Timmy, such a specimen. I wanted to do something, stop him somehow, but I crouched back and watched Azar pick up a tear gas grenade and pull the pin and throw it. The gas puffed up in a thin cloud. Jesus, please. He could go and tell Jorgenson, it's just us, don't worry about it, but he doesn't. He's paralyzed. A lot of paralysis in this chapter. It was my idea, and I'd rigged it up myself, a sandbag painted white and a pulley system. So Azar runs over and pulls on this rope, and up goes this white sandbag that hovers there in the misty swirl of gas. Jorgenson begins to fire, and then he recognizes, that's something's up. This is a joke. Jorgenson did not go nuts. Quietly, almost with dignity, he stood up and took aim and fired at the sandbag. So he knows it's just a sandbag. He moved with a kind of grace. When he reached the sandbag, Jorgenson stopped and turned and shouted out my name. Then he placed his rifle muzzle up against the white sandbag. O'Brien, he yelled. Well, he muttered, show's over. So he figures it out. Man, I'll tell you something. You're a sorry, sorry case, is what Azar says to him. I was trembling. I was hugging myself, rocking, but I couldn't make it go away. So he's so triggered by this, what he's doing to Jorgenson, that he is, remembering his own fear and paralysis when he got injured. He's just going through the trauma all over again while Azar is basically executing this plan. Disgusting, Azar says. He looked out at Jorgenson, then at me. His eyes had the opaque, spiritless surface of stone. He moved forward as if to help me up, and then he kicked me in the head. What a jerk. Sad, he murmured, and he headed off to bed. No big deal, I told Jorgenson, leave it alone. But he led me down to the bunker and used a towel to wipe the gash at my forehead. It wasn't bad, really. I felt some dizziness, but I tried not to let it show. It was almost dawn now. For a while we didn't speak. So, he finally said, right. And they shook hands. So I think that's important. Neither of us put much emotion into it, but we didn't look at each other's eyes. Jorgenson pointed out the shot-up sandbag. That was a nice touch. It almost had me. He squinted out. Anyway, a nice dramatic touch. Someday, maybe you should go into the movies or something. I nodded. That's an idea. You ever see the birds? Scary stuff. We sat for a long time. Are we even now? He said. Pretty much, Tim says. Again, I felt that closeness. Almost war buddies. We nearly shook hands again, but then decided against it. Jorgenson picked up his helmet, brushed it off, and looked back one more time at the white sandbag. His face was filthy. Up at the medic's hooch, he cleaned and bandaged my forehead, and then we went to chow. We didn't have much to say. I told him I was sorry. He told me the same thing, and then I said, let's kill Azar. Jorgenson gave me a half grin. Scare him to death, right? Right. I shrugged. Yeah, or just kill him. So there's a lot of closure here between them. This is kind of how they work things out on the field. But you can see, too, that there's a tremendous amount in here about just how war impacts a soldier psychologically, how trauma comes back, is triggered by other events, and this whole disembodiment that happens, whether you're a victim, whether you're, on the offense or the defense when it comes to battle.